Welcome to the Worth It Practice podcast. I was so excited about today's podcast because, first of all, it was my first guest episode I've ever recorded, and Joe Sanok was the guest. And also because I got to learn all about the way that Joe built first his group practice, then sold it, and then has really built the practice of the practice consulting business. Now, if you don't know who Joe Sanok is, it's important to know that he is the OG of the therapist entrepreneurial business space. He launched the Practice of the Practice podcast back in 2012. He's recorded over 1,300 episodes, and he's helped probably thousands of practice owners build their businesses and scale and change their mindsets. So of course, I wanted to know, how is he thinking? What is he doing in his own business? How has he leveled things up? Because this is the podcast for psychologist entrepreneurs who think bigger, who want to understand all of those shifts and insights. I have to tell you that this episode for me totally delivers. I learned so much from someone that I really admire. So I'm excited, and I think you will enjoy it too. Welcome to the Worth It Practice podcast. I'm so excited. I'm here with Joe Sanok, and you all know him from the Practice of the Practice. I'm going to let him introduce himself more in a moment, but I'm so excited to meet with him today and share his insights with you. So welcome to the show, Joe.
Oh, Leah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited that you're here and also like fangirling out a little bit that you're on my podcast. It's so exciting.
I'm so happy to be here. And I'm so proud of you with this podcast and the other podcast. It's just so great to see what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I feel like I'm getting so much support on this new part of my journey. One thing I talk a lot about in the newsletter and on this podcast is how important it is to do things that scare you a little bit. So here we are doing this first guest episode ever with Joe. So Joe, everyone knows who you are, but could you briefly introduce yourself for those who might not?
I had a very traditional counseling direction, worked in nonprofits for a while, eventually worked at a community college, and started a side gig counseling practice called Mental Wellness Counseling back in 2006. Really, it was meant to pay off student loan debt, and then hired a few people on the side that also wanted to pay off student loan debt. So kind of an accidental group practice owner. We couldn't get on any insurance panels. They were all closed in Northern Michigan at the time, and so we just were private pay, and that actually worked out really well. And then in 2012, started Practice of the Practice, which was the first podcast all about the business of private practice. So we help people build a thriving private practice they absolutely love. We just passed episode 1,300 of that. We have a bunch of different arms of the business. We've got the Practice Academy, which is aimed at helping people at 3 different phases of practice, of solo, starting a group and group practice. And then we do consulting and put on a couple events a year, like the 7-figure practice retreat we're doing in the Dominican Republic, which that's already full. And then we're doing the group practice conference in May of 2026. So that's me from the business side. I sold mental wellness counseling back in 2019. I'm also a dad of 2 wonderful, energetic girls that are 14 and 11. I have my partner, Claire, who's learning to be around girls. She doesn't have her own kids, so she's moved in and figuring out family life in a different way with her rescue dog. And we like paddleboarding and playing board games and improv comedy. So that's Joe.
That's amazing. Like clearly you've grown from this one place you didn't think you were going to be. And then there's so many arms of your business at this point. I'm trying to keep track of them all, right? So you have Practice of the Practice, you have the Practice of the Practice podcast. Then you have some offshoots of that, right? Like some other podcasts that are part of it.
Yeah, so I mean, we often will try things, see what sticks, and then kind of double down on the things that work. With Practice the Practice, that's the core business. And then we have the Practice of the Practice podcast, which anytime someone signs up for consulting or any of our bigger products, they almost always are like, oh my God, I've listened to the podcast for years. So it's a great marketing arm, but we also do multi-6 figures in sponsorships through that. So it's a pretty strong economic side for the business. And then we have different supports for people at every phase of practice. So we like to think of it as a spectrum where if people want just free things, we have a lot of free opt-ins and checklists and things like that on the website. If they want to pay a little bit for something, that's where we have the Practice Academy. So that's our membership. We have several hundred therapists that are in there that are in their solo, starting a group or group. And then when people are like, no, I want to move faster, that's where we have the consulting. So we kind of see it as that it's a spectrum. And then people that outgrow their practices, we have podcast launch school. We do coaching around how do you get book deals? How do you sell your practice? So really it's about kind of following that user journey from the moment they want to start a practice in, say, grad school or leave their full-time job all the way through, I want to sell this practice, or I want to go write books or start a podcast. We have something for people all the way through.
So you've been building this out, right? And obviously now this is a really big business that's kind of has all these different parts where you're following the entrepreneurial journey. But you started off in part-time private practice, an accidental group, and then with the podcast. When did you realize that you were actually an entrepreneur and not just a clinician? When did that identity shift happen?
It's interesting because when you look backward, you can see all these breadcrumbs throughout where it's like, oh, I didn't fit the typical mold. When I look at even when I was working at a runaway shelter throughout undergrad, so I'd work overnights and eventually I helped with placement services. So those would be kids that are in foster care and maybe they didn't have a place to go between foster homes or they were involved with other systems of care. I would do all these really interesting marketing things because I was supposed to grow that side of the nonprofit. And so even just anytime we got a referral, I would write a thank you note and then I would draw this really intricate, just hand-drawn address for people just to stand out in all the Department of Human Services mail to be have that person's name in really cool kind of hand-drawn font. And it's interesting how many of those DHS workers that were involved with child protective services and foster care would be your thank you notes are the highlight of my week. And it literally took me 10 minutes to just doodle on this thing, but it's made it stand out. And so thinking about how throughout college I was in bands and we'd be doing swag and t-shirts and just these things that then as you look at it, I wasn't your typical social worker that just had empathy and active listening. I did want my clients to take action. I did want to push them into different ways of thinking. It was really hard for me to sit there and just have them vent to me and then they don't take any action. And so I eventually got known as being a pretty action-oriented therapist. Some would say solution-focused. But I think I always was thinking about the business side without wanting to own that. Because all the business majors I knew in college were just such jerks. They were just the kind of guys I never want to hang out with. It was one of those things that it took me a while to really grab that identity. But literally when I was 5, I had a lemonade stand and I outsourced all the work to the neighbor kids so I didn't have to work and I still made a profit. And it was just God, I was 5 years old and outsourcing things. So it's been in there a while.
It's kind of funny how people who are really entrepreneurs at heart show those early signs. I was trying to sell a product door to door, except for the product I wanted to sell were toilet paper balls. So I was making balls out of toilet paper and water and crafting them with tape. And I really thought that they were beautiful. And I also wanted to sell them. And my parents just completely stopped me because that would have been really strange. It's when you're a kid and that's in you, you just want to do it from the start. Yeah. But sometimes it can take a while to recognize it, accept it as part of your identity.
Yeah, and I think my early business things, I joined this door-to-door vacuum salesman thing that my friends were doing, and they're like, oh yeah, every vacuum you sell, you get $1,000. It was totally a pyramid scheme. And I sold 2.5 vacuums. The last vacuum, I was so sick of being alone on the road. I told a friend of mine, just if you ride with me, I'll give you half of the profit. And so she rode around with me. And so I sold one to my parents, one to my parents' friends, and then one to a stranger. But it was we were taught how to sell these really expensive vacuums in trailer parks. And it was just these people can't afford this $2,000 vacuum in 1998. And so it just felt like all of business was telling people, buy this thing you don't need with money you don't have that isn't going to give you the results that you want. And I think when I got into counseling, I realized I do believe in counseling. This is genuinely solving people's problems. We have the background to get paid what we're worth. And we're getting results. And so when I started to see that all business isn't this slimy side of things, that's where it was a lot easier for me to own that business side of my background.
It's so interesting. Often when I talk to other clinicians, they'll say things to me like, I'm not really the CEO. I'm really the therapist. It's like they are like rejecting the business identity, like verbally out loud all the time. Like, was
Mm.
there a moment where you like suddenly said to yourself, oh, I'm the CEO of this company. Like I'm really doing it. Was there a moment for you?
I think it was less of like not wanting to be the CEO, but more recognizing that it actually was taking off. The mental illness counseling was this side gig where people that I had supervised in internships would be like, hey, can I work for you? Or I've heard good things about you. Can I just work here? And then kind of doing some podcasting on the side. When people started saying, hey, we'll give you $500 an episode for the podcast sponsorship, it's like, oh, whoa, like that's real money. That's like doing 4 of those a month, $2,000 a month, like back then, which even now, $2,000 a month is a lot. But like back then in particular, when I was the only income earner and working at a community college, it's like that was a very impactful thing where I'm like, oh my gosh, this podcast actually could make some money. And I remember a moment when I leveled up mental wellness counseling. We had been subleasing for a while, and then it was just too big with all these part-timers to stay in that sublease office. And so I rented this 4-office suite with a view of the water. It was way more than my mortgage was, but I still was working at the community college. And so I would scoot over at my lunch. My boss was really flexible where even if my lunch was like 90 minutes, I could scoot over, do counseling, come back, work a little later. She's like, you'll make it up. And I went over and it was one of my first sessions, and I'm leaving this office of my lunch with like this view of the water, the ideal clients that I'm working with. It's decorated how I want it to be. We've got a refrigerator with LaCroix and coconut water and kombucha, and it just feels like how I think a counseling office should feel. And I go back to the community college to my basement office that has no windows. And I realized I'm making more money through this side gig counseling practice than I am at the community college. And I think that's really where it clicked of like, what am I doing here? I need to have an exit plan to leave the college.
Wow. So you just had this like light bulb moment where you're like, you know what? One of these things feels really good and really aligned, and the other one doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
And now it's time to like make a decision about what I'm doing.
Yeah, totally.
How did that work out when you decided to take off the clinician hat and move out of that into the business sense? Was that tough for you?
Yeah, that was definitely a gradual, almost unintentional process. I noticed inside of me probably 2 years before I sold mental wellness counseling that I wasn't enjoying therapy as much, and that didn't feel fair to my clients. And so more and more I was looking for hiring people that could replace me. And so I was known as the guy that helped angry kids in town. And so I really had to find other therapists that could help angry kids because we were really known for that. I also got some training through the Gottmans. I had already been Gottman level 2, but worked with them on doing kind of a massive training where we got, I think, 15 people certified. Like we ordered their DVD and then a packet of their tests so that we could go through the whole thing together. So got a bunch of people Gottman certified so that there'd be more people in town that could do that work. So there was some planning around replacing myself, but it also was just noticing in my schedule when I looked and I saw it was a full day of podcasting and there were no clients. It was like, yes, awesome. And then when I'd have a couple clients in there, I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do this. And it just didn't feel fair to the clients to keep going. When it was time to sell, I think there was the internal side, similar to you, of my dad's a clinical psychologist. I think I wrote a paper in 2nd grade about wanting to be a therapist. That had been the goal. And we're told, yeah, go through all these things. Then you're going to be happy that you have the degree and pay off your student loan debt. And then I just realized I didn't want to do therapy anymore. That gradual process of exiting it, but still building up the podcast, it just was shifting into helping people differently with their practices and with expanding their practices and improving mental health access.
Were you at all tempted to keep it and become like just on the business side of things and maybe hire someone to run the more clinical part? Like, how did you decide to sell versus keeping it at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I was only spending about 15 minutes a week running the group practice, and we had 13 clinicians. And so it was so optimized. For me, it was really that the lease was up after 5 years. And did I want to sign another lease for 3 to 5 years and really be tied down to a physical place? And I just realized that for me to really go full tilt with practice of the practice, it needed to have my full attention. I got a fair price on the sale of it. In retrospect, I probably should have kept some ownership of it so I could have had some passive income. We now recommend people sell like 75% and then remain a silent owner. But it's one of those things that you just don't know what you don't know. And I was honestly just annoyed with the practice and was done with the
Mhm.
ups and downs of, okay, we're getting clients this month, we're not getting clients next month, we have to hire. And there'd be months where it was 15 minutes a week, and there's other months where I had to spend a few hours a week. And it just felt like I can't really go after what I want to with practice of the practice unless that's just like no longer an option.
That's so interesting. It seems like the lesson there was kind of like following your desire, like following your interest level, and then like accepting that you couldn't go all in on two things at one time, which is something I always personally struggle with is like, where does my attention go? Because if you divide it too much, right, you don't go anywhere, but then trying to figure out like, where is the place to really put it? I think that can be a really hard thing to figure out.
Yeah, I think the book, The One Thing, that Jay Papasan and Gary Keller wrote was really helpful. They have an image in there that I still think about all the time. It's a dot that has 12 little arrows off of it, and then there's another dot with just one big arrow off of it. And the idea is that you can go 12 directions an inch or you can go one direction a foot. And to me, it's just that it felt like that kind of decision of, do I really believe in practice of the practice and what I could do to outpace the competition, to out make content, to really have all those
Mhm.
eggs in that basket for a while. And if I wanted to go back, I always could.
That's a really interesting image. I can picture it as you're talking, and I can see how looking at those two things, especially as you were feeling almost like a repulsion towards continuing to run the group, I can see how that led you in that direction.
Yeah. I found in that style of management, I didn't enjoy it. I needed to move away from it.
Yeah. Did you have to make any big shifts in your mindset in order to do that, or had that
Mm.
gradually been happening just naturally inside of you?
I think the biggest shift was learning really how to operate the virtual team of practice of the practice because before that, it was making good money, but it was a smaller team. We didn't have a clear vision. We didn't have a person in the operations role. We had the wrong people in the wrong seats. I think I had to level up my like genuine CEO role because just the structure of practice, the practice is similar to a group practice in some ways, but in a lot of ways is very different. I think I just had to kind of shift my mindset of what my skills needed to be to lead with practice of the practice.
What traits do you think allow someone to do that? And because you work with so many practice owners,
Mm.
right? You've made this shift yourself. If an entrepreneur is really like, I want to think big, I want to do something outside what I originally thought I wanted to do, what needs to be there for them to do that successfully?
Yeah. I mean, I would adjust the question a little bit because I think traits to me tends to point to things that kind of are naturally occurring. And I
Mhm.
believe that all of our natural occurring things are perfect for us. The things that come for you or for me that may be more entrepreneurial, there's other people that maybe don't have those that I think can be successful in their own way. So I would adjust it a little bit to say, like, what are the things that it takes to level up beyond your practice? Would that be a fair adjustment of your question?
Oh, I love that because I think we can learn anything.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
that what we tend to teach is when you're building something, you want to build the audience first. Before you go
Mhm.
spend a bunch of money on an e-course or a podcast or whatever, see if you even like it. Go live on TikTok interviewing people or talking about different things. Start blogging about something you're interested in. See if you can build up an email list of people or followers and then start to launch the projects outside of it. We typically see that when people have that audience. They then test it out to see, hey, in that audience, is there something brewing up there? How do we test selling that ahead of time? Then how do you pre-sell that so that then you know, okay, my audience wants it, and then we build it instead of spending $10,000 on building an e-course that only two people buy.
So you think that a mistake people often make is like starting with the end product without testing through whether it's something people even want in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, all of us are trained to build programs. So if I said to you, Leah, I want you to build a program for parents at your kids' elementary school to address bullying, you would have a 12-point program based on research with handouts, with talking points within half an hour.
Mhm.
That would come very
Yes.
easily to you. In the real world of entrepreneurship, you could go down that direction and say, I want to build a bullying program, and you sketch this whole thing out. And you don't even know if there's an audience for a bullying program that you could attract. And so we've got to test some of these things out to see, let's go on social media for a week and just go live every day talking about bullying. Do we even get anyone to show up? Let's email any sort of email list some things around bullying. Let's talk to teachers and get some evidence to see, is this something that there's a need for? And then we can walk through some pretty precise steps that we teach as to how do you then test out those particular things.
Yeah, to me, I immediately think like, oh, this is an experiment where you're hypothesizing
Yeah.
that people want a bullying program, and then you're trying to like do that initial research before you launch into the full study, where in the end you might not get it supported at all.
Yeah, you want to validate it. You want to make sure that people are going to actually pull out their credit cards and buy it. Don't just say, if 1,000 people paid $10, we're going to make a bunch of money. No, let's see if we can actually sell some spots into programs ahead of time.
That's really helpful to think about, just like that reframe back to let's be willing to experiment. And I wonder if that's like one of those kinds of skill sets or things that people can learn to do is to be tolerant of the discomfort of doing something that doesn't have an immediate success rate.
Well, and I think that is one of the things I talk about in Thursday is the New Friday. My book is there's a whole section on internal inclinations. So what are naturally occurring things in successful leaders, those traits? One of them is to be able to be curious. And curiosity is based on not having a pass-fail mindset. To say, I did a social media campaign, we didn't get any clicks. We learned some things from that, and now we're going to adjust from there. That all of it's a learning process to say, okay, I tried to launch this product for $500. Nobody bought it. I have a cheapskate audience, and I need to work on building my audience that can afford those sorts of things or understand the value of what I'm offering. Or I just don't have people that will even respond to me. I sent an email to 1,000 people to say, hey, I'd love to jump on a phone call to talk about how to be a better parent. We're thinking about launching some courses and just want to have some conversations. If nobody replies to that, then it's like, I have a disengaged audience. I need to figure out how to engage them before I ever start thinking about products.
Yeah, I love that. It's like you have to be willing to see the situation as an experiment or a learning process, not as a reflection of you, so that you can put yourself out there in those ways, get the real data, and then create what works. And it sounds like what I'm assuming as you're saying this is that that's how you've built practice of the practice over time, is by kind of seeing what is resonating with people.
Yeah, and I think that as we help, we've got several hundred people in the Practice Academy. We've helped, I think at this point, over 3,000 or 4,000 practices, scale. We can see those trends of like what's working in group practice right now, what's working in launching a practice, and things that I taught a year ago. Now I'm saying, no, don't do that anymore. Like the market has shifted. Right now, what we see working, and we're testing it out. And then as we see more and more practices have success with that, that's the power of being in community with other therapists, is that someone in New York and someone in LA and someone in Traverse City, Michigan, and someone in rural Pennsylvania, if we're talking and saying, here's what's working here, we then all can move forward faster than if we're all just trying to do it in our own silo.
Yeah, I love that. It's about like community, and it's about being really on top of what works now. I mean, I agree with you. Like the things I do now to run Thriving Child Center are completely different in a lot of ways than the things I did a year ago. They just don't work anymore, which I kind of secretly find exciting at the same time as terrifying. I wonder if you do too a little bit.
I mean, if you can put your finger on what's going wrong, then yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I do think that it's interesting to just look at how, like, for some of our podcasts, they've really plateaued in numbers. And we're like, well, what's going on? We have more people working from home, so they're in the car less. Mm-hmm. This year, we've done a lot of big interviews with big time people, but they're not as precise around private practice. So maybe that turned off some of our audience. And we've been around a while. Maybe people want something new. We're trying to figure out and put our finger on, like, why did we plateau in 2025 instead of grow like we thought, even though we were bringing in these really big time guests? I think that there is some part of that that's exciting. There's other parts of it that is just like, wow, what are we doing wrong? We got to keep the experimental mindset.
Yeah, no, that part is frustrating. I don't like not knowing the reason behind anything. If things are going well, I want to know why they're going well so I can double down. And if they're not, then I really want to know why so I can fix it. Though, if it were all easy all the time, Joe, I suspect you and I would both get bored.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the pain of life and the ability of things to go wrong is what makes life interesting.
It does. It absolutely does. Well, Joe, I love that you are on the podcast today. I really appreciate you This would be a great time for you to share some things like about the practice. Is it the Practice Con that's coming up
There's
that
yeah,
everyone
so we
is?
have the Practice Academy, and then we have the
Yeah.
Group Practice Conference. So yeah, so we have the Practice of the Practice podcast, over 1,300 episodes about building a private practice you love. And then I would say the membership community is a great fit for anyone that's in solo, starting a group, or has a group practice. So everyone that listens, over at practiceofthepractice.com/membership. You can book a tour there, talk to Sarah. She will personally walk you through, show you. It's not a big sales call. It's literally just, here's what our community's like. If it's a fit, we would love for you to join it. And then we have the Group Practice Conference coming up in May 2026. So over at grouppracticeconference.com, you can get all the details there, grab your ticket, and we can hang out live here in Traverse City.
Yep, and I'll put all of those links in the show notes. I think they're all going to be absolutely amazing events. And obviously, if those of you who are reading this newsletter know that I often feature Joe's episodes because I think they're amazing. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad that you were here on the Worth It Practice podcast, and I will talk to you again next week.